Hello, Internet. Gino, that Pinguino, Grieco, here again with another episode of Deep Listens. And I am joined, well, today we're talking about Hyper Light Drifter, and I am joined, as always, by Billy the Mimic Rothert.
You know, I've always found myself to be worth, my weight in gold. But when you open up a chest and then it starts attacking you, that's when you know shit gets real.
Yes. People couldn't see it, but as I was doing my normal audio announcement, my normal intro, Billy was just mocking me.
It's taken him this long to learn it. It's only been 2 years, but he's finally got it down.
I mean, I've listened to it about 80,000 more times than you all have in the editing process.
It's true.
Because every time I have to line up, like the opening music, I just got to keep looping the "Hello, Internet."
Well,
that whole spiel.
One of these times, if you defeat me, you can do the intro. But until that day comes,
I'll have to beat you in a fight, and then you'll drop like an orb. It's going to be called like the soul of the Pinguino.
Oh,
and
no.
It'll give me a double jump in Balda's story.
Oh, no.
I feel like somewhere Billy has a list, like a real-world drop chart of like stuff he just has to find before he dies to complete his life.
At the top of that list was a completion of Hyper Light Drifter.
There you go.
That's fair. Good segue. And that other voice before we talk about Hyper Light Drifter, we are also joined by Peter the Dolphin Hater Busby.
I do. I hate that. I went kayaking in Florida one time. And the person I was with, she turned to me and she's like, "Yeah, there are dolphins in the water." And I've never been so terrified in my life than the thought that like this dolphin was going to upend me from this kayak and just murder me. I don't know what it was, but I'll never get in the water with dolphins again. I hate them.
To be fair, we were in a kayak in water with manatees and with crocodiles, and I can confirm that you were not that intimidated.
No, crocodiles don't care at all. I love manatees, but something about dolphins, I don't trust them at all.
What do you trust more, butterflies or dolphins?
Oof.
I guess maybe the dolphin's intelligence could be reasoned with, but I think like a butterfly's just out for blood.
I could take a butterfly though, like as long as I kept it away from my eyes. But like I'd lose a fight to a dolphin.
Okay.
Like I'm not winning that fight.
I mean, if you were able to take the dolphin onto your turf, I feel like you've got a distinct advantage.
Maybe.
But the problem is you only ever encounter dolphins on their
That's
turf.
the thing. Like I'm not gonna like hear it knock on my door, and be like, "Oh, a guest. Who's this today?" Open the door, dolphin attack. They don't even have necks though. You can't even choke them.
You can't even choke them.
Can't even choke them out. You could like just plug the hole.
Plug the hole.
Just...
Take that. It's like punching the gills on a shark, but way worse. But they still have their mouths. They can still breathe out of their mouths.
Can they?
Yes.
I think
I don't
so.
know.
Why do they have blowholes if they can breathe out of their mouths?
I think they use both. I would hope. Why do we have noses if we can breathe out of our mouths?
That's a good question too. Okay.
The things that we get into on Deep Listens, like there's no
deep.
fucking limits, baby.
They're
It's
deep.
true. Speaking of things with or without noses, the dude in Hyper Light Drifter I think he has a nose.
I would say he does.
Face.
Good segue. Another good segue.
I think he has a nose.
Let's just list game characters with noses for the rest of the podcast.
Sonic the Hedgehog.
Patrick Star. Oh no, I lost.
Kirby. Ah, shit. He doesn't either.
Mario. Nose.
There you go. Okay, we're back on track.
You're the winner, Gino.
Okay, so if you want to get in touch with this terrible, terrible show, you can do so at Deep Listens Pod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We have comment sections and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. Leave us feedback if you so choose. Now, without further ado, Billy, Hyper Light Drifter, what is this game?
All right, so brief intro to the story. This is actually one of my favorite things about this game so far is how it presents story. So we're going to circle back to this later, but I'm just going to give some of the brief introductory pieces. You get about 99% of the game's backstory from the first 2-minute cutscene. Other than that, you really don't get a lot to explain what this game's all about. And that's intentional. That is an intentional design characteristic. So what we get is that there was some ancient, I guess I should step back even further. The setting of the game is far in the future, post-apocalypse, like subtle and small rebuilding of society in these sort of pocket cultures. What we know from the intro of the game is that in the past, a vastly advanced civilization was wiped out in some way. And there was some involvement of these large Titan creatures or constructs. Not quite sure. We're leaning towards constructs based on other clues you get pretty early in the game.
Yeah, big ass robots.
These big ass robots and some other massive explosion or calamity has wiped out all civilization, leaving traces at best left. The protagonist, the drifter, is met with a series of visions involving, just pools and pools of bodies and blood and just massive destruction in the wake of this disaster. Visions of a black dog figure that is sort of referred to or discussed as Anubis, just because they share such a similar likeness. And so we also get that, I guess we have that there's an ancient civilization, big robot titans are involved, everything was wiped out, there's some kind of black dog figure, and then the last piece is the drifter is sick, is afflicted with some kind of ailment that causes the drifter to, cough up blood or have some kind of episode like coughing fit. So the drifter's not well, and then right at the beginning of the game, we're sort of dropped in after having one of our coughing fits, and we are rescued by another drifter and brought to sort of the main route town. We are presented with very limited information. Essentially, he gives us a map, and we get 4 cardinal directions: north, south, east, west. And the most vague little picture that says what you're supposed to do. Pull some switches, complete the 4 cardinal directions, and that's it. Then we just start the game.
Yep. And this game is one of the starkest that we've played for this show and sparsest in terms of information. So from a gameplay perspective, it is a 2D kind of action game in the vein of like a Zelda, but a lot more twitchy. It's definitely closer to a Valdis story, like with combos and...
Game of the year, Valdis story?
Yeah, Game of the Year 2015, Valdis story. Now, I actually want to pause a little bit and say it feels to me closer to like a Titan Souls kind of game, where, I mean, they're also very similar, but whereas Zelda, you can just kind of like mash on buttons and rely on your items to just get you through, this game is more execution based. So I think you're on the right track when you say combo, because you really only have like a certain amount of sword swings before you go on an awkward cooldown. So you have to like use every single ability in like a pattern in order to have combat efficacy achieved.
Yeah, you're juggling a bunch of... Actually, Fury probably is closer.
Fury's pretty close.
You've got guns, you've got dashing, and you've got sword moves, and you can only do a 3-hit combo with your sword before you're at a cooldown. You do get different guns. The thing that made me think Zelda was a lot of the moves that you have unlockable moves, unlike a game like Fury where you're just given your loadout and that's what you have. You start getting... You can purchase unlocks like Charge Blade that's almost like the Zelda. You hold the sword out and then you do
like spin attack,
a
basically.
360 attack. You get different guns over the course of the game. You eventually get dash slashes, which are pretty good. You kind of do that anime style. You dash through something and then it gets cleaved in half. But all of these different abilities that you unlock can be really potent, like reflecting bullets back with your sword.
So we don't get much to go on. We only get these 4 cardinal directions. Which one did you guys do first?
I went north.
East.
You went east first, Pete?
Yeah, I went east.
I went west and then couldn't figure out what to do, and so then I went north.
I tried to go south, couldn't go south.
Yeah, it's blocked off.
South
So
is the only wrong choice.
Yeah, south is the only
sorry.
wrong choice at first. And so I did north. And as you play through these levels, again, there's no guidance. You're just exploring. But while you're going through these levels, you're going to come across these hints or clues that make you sort of go somewhere, like sort of beckon you to come explore something.
Mm-hmm.
It usually takes you on some, you usually find some kind of like elevator or lift or platform. It'll take you to some little like mini dungeon, the end of which has this sort of interactable switch or node. Imagine like in the futuristic sci-fi films, like a power cell. You kind of twist it, pull it out of its socket. You're basically doing one of those numbers, but it's rooted in the earth itself. Each of these 4 cardinal directions has about 8 of these nodes to activate or deactivate, perhaps. But you only need 4 of them to reach the boss of that world. So you can go these 3 initial cardinal directions and then the final 4th, pop these nodes that you find just somewhere in the environment. And it could be any combination of them. There's, I guess, 8 that you could find. And then you can address one of the 4 bosses from the cardinal direction, and then you just go after that to, I guess, the final boss area. It's pretty straightforward once you get the hang of it.
Yeah,
It's pretty straightforward.
And the game does a pretty good job. Each of the different environments, at least the 4 cardinal directions, you could run into the hunter who rescued you kind of towards the end of each of the areas, like right before the boss area, and he will update the location of at least 4 of the modules on your map so that it gives you some kind of hint about where you should go to find them. Which, considering how well hidden some of them are, it's nice to have a hint, like the bare minimum that you need to reach the boss, where they might be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's usually the most straightforward are marked on your map. But they do a good job of mixing up how you need to get them. Some of them are behind combat dungeons. Some of them are kind of behind hidden area. They're in hidden nooks of the map. Like maybe you have to find a secret passageway, and then there's just one with no enemies surrounding it. Some that are behind kind of platforming puzzles or dashing puzzles.
Right.
They do a good
This
job
game-
mixing it up.
This game has some elements of like a Dark Souls game that I like, which is, and we're going to hit on this one, which is there's essentially like the illusory wall mechanic. You can just walk up to a wall that would seem a normal part of the environment, but maybe it's off by a pixel, and you can just walk through it to a completely hidden area that you were not even aware of. Finding those things are actually going to be essential to early game success.
Yeah, but what do you guys? So there's really one main reward structure, right? Like you have health kits, and those are vital to sort of make it through the game. But if you think about the key reward, it's really the in-game currency that they reward you with most. You can purchase upgrades, like Gino said. And I mean, I don't know what I'd want in addition to that, but I don't know. It got a little not stale, but there were only so many upgrades I wanted. You know what I mean? So in terms of rewarding me for that exploration, based on how fastidious you need to be to find some of these rooms, I might have liked some sort of additional or different reward to go along with it.
There are keys and stone tablets that you can find. I just don't know what they do, but it looked like the key unlocks something in the final area. The keys unlock something in the final area, and I don't know what the stone tablets do. But there are other rewards.
We can... sorry to interrupt, but we can talk about the stone tablets during the story section. They do something.
They also they do something.
They do something
important.
super annoying, but they do something.
The keys do a fair bit through the game. You can just find throughout the game these doors, and it will tell you how many keys you need. Your keys persist on you, unlike a Zelda game where your keys get consumed after opening a door.
Okay.
If you collect a couple keys, they persist. So if you collect 5 keys, you have 5 keys. And you might come across a door that requires 7 keys, and you just need to get 2 more keys to open it.
Did you open any of the doors, Billy? I didn't get any of the key doors.
I did get to open some of the doors. I think I acquired 5 or 6 keys. You can get things like extra modules are behind some of the key doors. Gold bits are behind a lot of the key doors. Additional costumes are behind many of the key doors.
So I was gonna say, if it's just gold bits, this is sort of the same problem. But additional costumes are pretty cool.
Especially because the additional costumes have abilities and effects.
Really?
Yes.
Right.
We can take a little quick tangent in here and say, what are we actually being rewarded with? Pete, I think what you're looking for here is this reward. Because we do have the gold bits as the main reward, I guess, like the first level reward.
Yeah.
But so you're going to need to do the exploration to get those gold bits and get the keys. The gold bits are used to help you get the keys. They make you more combat efficient, but you're right. After a certain point, you start getting diminishing returns on your gold bit investments.
Well, and there's some gold bits that if you don't get them, you just don't have the abilities necessary to get to certain places. Like the wave dash is something that without it, there are certain areas you can't get there.
Exactly. So some of the gold bits in the early part of the game, like in fact, the north direction is just rich with gold bits, and they're not that hard to find. So, I explored north and east in my first 2 plays of this game because I had to restart. Unfortunately, yeah, I'm moving right now, so I played this game for about 4 or 5 hours on my desktop. Realized, oh shit, like my new apartment doesn't have internet. I had to restart on my laptop.
Wow.
So. I got to experience a lot of the beginning part of the game because I played it twice. Going north is probably the easiest and probably best way to go for the first part of the game. Not because it's easier, and in fact, I think the north boss is considerably harder than the east boss.
Yeah, I agree.
But the gold bits that you can get in the north section, you can get probably 2 or 3 upgrades just by farming out completely the north section if you know where all things are. But circling back to what I was talking about, why do we look for these? The exploration part, you get rewarded for, it's gold bits step 1. But then once you get keys and you get the abilities you need to find more gold bits and more keys. So forgive the exploration feedback loop for a second, Pete. You're rewarded at the end with these new costumes, and these new costumes have abilities like making your energy or your stamina recharge faster, making your guns refill bullets faster, making your grenades, once you get the grenade as one of the purchasable abilities, make that thing recharge faster. And it's actually a big deal. Like grenades take, I think, 110 seconds to refill, and with the orange cape, they take 50 seconds to refill. So that's kind of a game changer. That effectively doubles your grenade per level count. So there is an end reward. Yeah, it's sort of cosmetic. Yeah, it's sort of just more combat efficiency, but there is something bigger that we're fighting for besides just gold bits.
Yeah, and the different guns and things that you find, most of them, at least the ones I found, were all on the beaten path, but those different guns are pretty significant in terms of changing up the gameplay. The starting pistol you have is like a 6-shot pistol that is pretty normal. Shooter. It does the same amount of damage as your blade, and it's good at hitting like switches basically, and occasionally switching up your combat style. There weren't a lot of enemies that I felt the need to use that gun on, but then once I found some of the other guns like the laser or the shotgun, those changed up how I played pretty drastically. Like the laser does, I think, twice as much damage as your blade, so it does 2 hits instead of 1, which meant that enemies that had 2 pips of health, I could snipe down from pretty far away, which meant that I just didn't have to engage with some of them. Whereas the gun, as soon as you shoot an enemy once, they're kind of turned on, and then they start moving around, and it makes it harder to hit them a second time. The laser, they're dead before they even know that they were in combat, which is pretty different. And then the shotgun, it does like 5 or 6 damage if you run up on someone in true Halo style. And that became my new melee weapon, was the shotgun. I would dash up on someone and just shotgun them.
You have a sword, but you're using your gun as your melee weapon.
Yep. And it was way more efficient than using the sword. At least for me.
Okay, yeah.
I took out multiple bosses by just running up on them with the shotgun.
Well, how did you reload, Gino?
I hit them like 3 times, and then I shotgunned them 3 more times, and they died.
Yeah. You should talk about how we handle reload and sort of like action economy in this game.
Yes. So in this game, you have a certain number of bullets for each gun. At least initially, you can upgrade them to have more bullets. But the way that shooting works is every shot will decrease the number of bullets you have left. But to refill, you have to blade things. You have to cut things up. The suffering of others refills your bullets. And it refills fastest when you're knifing up enemies, but you can break things in the environment as well, and they will refill your gun. So if you cut up bushes, that'll refill your gun. If you cut up boxes. But mostly the blood of your enemies will refill your gun the fastest. It satiates your blood's need for violence. And so it forces you to mix up how you approach different enemies. You can't really rely on your gun. You can rely on your sword, which for the early game meant that I just didn't use my gun. But then once I got better guns, it became an interplay between the two. I did actually want to use the gun more, but I needed to wet its lips with blood first before I could use it more.
So the thing that I liked about this game is that it forced you in a very similar way that Fury forced us and Valda's story forced us. It forced us to be diverse with our actions. It didn't give us the choice to just smash our heads against an enemy until it was dead.
Oh, I don't know.
All right, well, you can play the game how you want, Gino. But I think this game opened up and developed as you got better with the combat system. Slight caveat, I had to play on a shitty-ass Logitech controller that had like a bad, sort of a bad button. So multi-dashing for me was kind of a 50-50 because the button wouldn't like register the right timings because like a plastic crappy little Walmart controller. But when I played on my PS3 controller on my desktop, the multi-dashing was like so fluid. I felt like I was always moving in combat and always changing what I was doing. You know, dash, dash, sword, sword, dash, gun, gun, dash. You know, it was this rotation of sort of actions that kept combat fluid, kept me always moving, and kept me alive. Because you don't have a lot of health in this game, and if you slip up, you're going to get blown up.
Yeah.
Yeah, the dash really ties sort of the whole thing together. Like, really, I think the dash mechanic made the combat what it was. Just because, like you said, you're constantly moving, changing direction, stop, slash, move again. Without that, it would have been fine with just guns and swords, but that mobility is key here.
It's the drifting.
That's who you are. That's who you are as a person.
You're a drifter.
Hyperlight drifter, not hyperlight sworder or hyperlight gunner.
No.
This game 100% encourages spamming out the dash. I mean, that should be, in my opinion, the first upgrade you get almost invariably.
Yeah.
Because it turns the mobility on.
Yeah, and it took me a little while to notice that there's basically a stamina meter that you have at the top of the screen that the more you chain dash, the lower that gets, and you'll eventually run out. That meter also governs your ability to dash and slash. So once you unlock that ability, you just kind of press slash and dash, and then everything in between you and the point you dash to gets cut for double damage, basically. And that's another pretty big deal because crowd control is a big thing in this game. And that's one of the only melee move. One of the only melee moves that's good at crowd control. Most melee attacks only really hit one target.
One slight correction: you can dash indefinitely.
Really? I saw the meter go down.
It does go down if you use the timing just a little bit inefficiently. But there's an achievement for chaining together 800 dashes.
That's gross. Okay.
Which I got. There's a way you can cheese it out.
Of course you do.
So essentially, in the shop where you can purchase your dash abilities, you all probably noticed that there was like a little racetrack looking thing.
Yeah.
And if you dash like 100 times in a row in succession, you get some gold bits. But if you dash 800 times in succession,
you get a call from some psychiatric services, and they just make sure everything's fine. You're okay.
You did this on purpose? Okay.
You get.
We're sending somebody to your house, but you relax.
You get the purple outfit, and the purple outfit affects your energy consumption, which is used for doing those dashes, the chain dashing. If you do it in such a way that you're not maximally optimizing your dash to energy recovery ratio.
So you can dash 800 times in a row, and they give you an outfit that makes it easier to dash.
Hang on, there's another piece. It reduces the energy consumption of your charged attacks by 50% as well. Okay. So I got the upgrade that gives you like the spin attack, and that requires your meter as well. And if you do your spin attack, you can only do about 3 of them before you have to let your meter recharge a bit. And now I could do like 5 or 6, and that was a game changer for me.
Question. You said you can cheese out the 800 dash thing. Did you like tape a rubber band to one of the analog sticks and then put a little like Dippy Bird to hit the X button?
Yes, actually, I had to get a Dippy Bird just right. No, so what you do is you actually change the controls on the game to the mouse and keyboard version. And you go into the arena, and you just kind of have to find a sweet spot where, because in the mouse and keyboard version, you use your mouse cursor to aim all your abilities. So it's going to dash wherever your mouse cursor is pointing. And if you get into a sweet spot where your mouse cursor is right in the middle of where your dash length would be, you will dash through your own mouse cursor and then immediately dash backwards, back and forth across like the finish line. And
so then the only thing you have to do is press the dash button 800 times?
No. You just, it's the space bar on the mouse and keyboard control. So you just have to tap the space bar 800 times, but keep the right rhythm. It turned into a little bit of a rhythm game. And I failed a couple times. Like, oh man, only got 200 this time. Oh man, now I got 450. 690. I was so close. Oh, bam, got 800.
How long do you think this took you?
Oh, probably only like 30 minutes.
Okay.
Is that the saddest sentence we've ever had on the podcast? All you have to do to unlock the outfit is press the spacebar 800 times.
I mean, I probably pressed it closer to 2,000 times, because if you count all my fail cases.
Okay. That's better.
If you do 800 plus about 600 plus about 400, 200. Yeah, now we're at about 2,000 times.
It's fine. We all decide how we spend our finite time on this.
It was a great reward, though. The fact that you could dash better with the cape was not that amazing, but essentially getting double charge abilities, that was good.
I unlocked one outfit in this entire game, and it's the one you get.
They give you.
Yeah, they just literally give you. And I don't even know if that one had any abilities. I didn't notice a difference.
It does. You just find that one. That one's ability is faster recharges. It affects your energy recharge rate.
Okay.
So the meter goes up faster.
Did that
once you use it?
Would that improve my shotgunning?
Probably not.
No, then I
because you use your meter when you use
your
shotgun
outfit
dash abilities.
No, I don't think
I didn't have that in mind. They weren't like, oh, somebody's probably just going to shotgun all these bosses we've meticulously crafted.
Well, no, there is. There was an outfit that made your bullets recharge with fewer slashes. So if Gino wanted to go shotgun only, he could just further reduce the amount of time he had to use his sword by recharging the shotgun shells faster.
That's fair. And I found that most bosses survived about 2 rounds of shotguns.
They respond well to shotgunning.
They're very vulnerable to bullets to the gut.
Yeah.
They also have very big sprites, which makes it way easier to get all the shotgun hits.
They are pretty big. Shotgun was a game changer in the boss fights for sure, but I didn't use it for damage as much as I used it for crowd control of the ads. So I really wanted that one-on-one time with the bosses, and that kind of personal time. I wanted to get to know them, but they would keep bringing the bros, and you just had to pop them, and then they were done.
So
now, in comparison,
about the guns. I did not toggle between the two. You're allowed to equip 2 guns at once and switch between them. I did not switch between them because there's a shotgun. Why would I want to use the other one? Does the other gun have separate ammo, or are both of the ammos governed by the same? Okay. Okay. So even then, there wouldn't be a good reason to switch.
No.
So like I said, we're still in mechanics land. We've talked about some of the capes, the different outfits, the like sort of the general collectibles, the weapons. Pete, what was your go-to style of fighting or dealing with a particular room or a boss?
I would usually go laser for like the long-range bullet dudes I didn't feel like dealing with, and then just sword dash around.
Also pierces, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was big on the laser.
As long as we can agree that laser and shotgun are the 2 superior guns, at least of the ones you get by default.
I
mean, like the Magnum's okay, but it's just like a worse shotgun, really.
I thought it was like a worse laser because
it's actually kind of both. Like it's kind of in between.
Yeah,
it's worse than both. It's not good enough in either direction to really replace them because the laser is an instantaneous shot in a straight line that pierces. The Magnum, I think, does it? I think it pierces.
No, the laser's the only piercing weapon. Okay. Sorry, it's called the rifle because there is a laser, and it's basically the Spartan laser from Halo.
What?
It does 7 damage, but it requires you to be stationary and charge for like a second or two.
Oh,
it's not that great.
Yeah, being stationary seems bad.
Yes.
Yeah, especially in this game.
Yep.
But the Magnum, the problem with that gun is just when you pull the trigger, it's not like a quick bullet. The bullet slowly accelerates and then it goes fast. At least from when it was used on me, that's what it seemed to do. And I had a shotgun, so
that was it.
Yep.
I didn't use the bomb really either.
The bomb was great for crowd control.
Yeah. Well,
I'd say only get 1 though, because it deals 2 damage to basically the whole screen.
Okay.
And so any of those little like frog enemies or little plant enemies or little like robot spiders, they just get annihilated. Almost any ranged enemy is killed or reduced to 1 health, so they're very easily dealt with afterwards. It doesn't do much against any more hearty enemy because it only does 2 damage. Enemies in this game have between 1 and 5 health,
except for bosses.
Bosses have more. There are some enemies that have more health, but it's kind of negligible since they're so slow. You can just basically jump around them, and their health is meaningless. Like if you go west, there's a couple like big like lumbering crystal monsters, and they have like 8 or like I think they have like 8 health. And the Drifter has 5 health, so health is like kind of evenly matched in this game. If an enemy gets 3 hits on you, you're probably going to die. If you get 3 hits on an enemy, it's probably going to die. But bosses have like 30 health, so that's considerably more. The bosses are definitely scaled against you, not only in the just raw tankiness of them, but in what their combat efficacy offers. So just to finish up this quick conversation, my preferred fighting style was the 3 upgrades that I got first were the chain dash, parry, and the charge strike. So I would very frequently stay at range, go in. Actually, I should say the 4th one because the 4th one matters. The 4th one that I got was the ability that lets you dash through bullets. there's an ability that kind of shields you as you do a dash, and you can
what?
dash through bullets.
Yeah.
I didn't get that one.
It makes you invulnerable to bullet fire as you dash, but it works better. They say in the game specifically, it works better if you're dashing straight at the bullet. Like a glancing, like sideways shot might still catch you. So I would know, oh, this is the boss's animation for getting ready to shoot. I'm going to run at him, dash through his volley, and then do a charge strike, which would deal 5 damage. And I could do charge strikes pretty fast. So I could deal like maybe 10, 15 damage maybe to a boss.
That sounds a lot less sloppy than the way I played. I didn't get the bullet reflecting until I think the final level. I didn't use it.
Parrying or the shield?
The one where you can, parry bullets back at your opponents. I didn't have that. I didn't get dashing through bullets. My main focus was rolling up on dudes and shotgunning them, so I didn't. I upgraded my shotgun to have more bullets, and I got chain dash.
I actually never had a single gun upgrade. Oh, take it back. One time I accidentally upgraded the pistol, which is the worst choice.
Yep, you screwed up.
Like I was opening up the gun. I was actually watching. And this is going to be an important point because this made me realize something that we're going to talk about in second half. We talk about story. I was playing this game super late last night, and Doctor Strangelove just sort of came on TV.
Good movie.
And I forget what scene it was, but it distracted me as I was opening up the shop.
Oh no!
And I kept holding the open button, and it just automatically upgraded the gun for me. I spent money that I didn't want to spend.
Oh no!
Money is not easy to come by after like the mid game.
Yeah, you need to find them in the nooks and crannies of levels. There'll be boxes with upgrades in them, and then there's some rooms that just drop. Like the last enemy will drop a upgrade, but other than that,
South gives a ton of gold at your way though.
Yeah, South gives you.
But I mean, at then you're pretty much at the end.
Yeah. Can we take a quick break and then come back with story stuff?
Absolutely.
I have a couple more mechanics. We can definitely take a quick break.
Then if you two want to discuss it, I'll be back in a sec.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. So one thing that I wanted to hit on real quick was moving through the world and how you interact with your map.
Okay.
So the map seems to have, I didn't examine this very closely, but does it have like a fog of war where if you go to an area, it becomes more detailed on the map? Did you notice that?
Yeah, it like reveals it. So you can see like the general outline, but like the individual rooms get revealed as you go. Right.
So we had a similar map situation as perhaps maybe Jotun, where it gives you just like the general look. Yep. And as you find certain key locations, maybe they'll get highlighted, but your general location is kind of obscured. It'll tell you on the map about where you are, but it won't give you super, super detailed map location, like in some other game like a Skyrim or like a, perhaps like a Zelda game, have you like a very specific map with your arrow on it. This has sort of like general area. So maybe you'll look at your map and say, well, I don't know where I'm supposed to go, but it seems like it's kind of going south and to the west. Okay, great. Maybe I need to find one of these modules, and I see it on my mini map. I see it on my map, but I don't have like a clear path to get there. This lends even further to the exploration style of the game. Something that I liked because it gave me a general direction to go and said, hey, if you explore this direction, you're going to find stuff, so go for it. How'd you feel about it?
I thought it was good. One nice part of it, too, was it seemed like the map was more detailed when you were underground. So like as the dungeons themselves became more complex, it gave you a little bit more of a foothold, which I thought was important because the dungeons are, obviously, as they should be, more complex to move through than the overworld.
Yeah, I think the dungeons had more ways to be cyclical, overlap, and you could get turned around and kind of lost. When I played through the first time before I had to restart, I went through a couple of dungeons in the north and the east that I actually didn't find the module for, and it wasn't clear to me at the time that I was mainly looking for these modules. So I'd go through a dungeon and I'd get rewarded with like gold bits, or I'd just get rewarded with a cool experience or a piece of story. and I think, oh great, that's what this dungeon was for, and then I'd leave missing one of the modules because almost invariably one of these dungeons has a module somewhere in it.
Yeah,
So
I did that a
was
couple
something
times
that
too.
that was something that I didn't catch, I didn't pick up on until I was forced to restart. Forcing myself to restart because of my computer situation gave me, I guess, a chance to optimize my early gameplay. I essentially got a chance to redo the first 3 to 5 hours of Hyper Light Drifter, and it optimized my play. And actually, my whole experience just got a little bit more. It just turned on the game more for me because, like when I first played, I think the first upgrade I got was the spin attack, and then I got like a gun upgrade, and it just my combat efficacy was not that strong. Then I was like, oh shit, I needed to get parry and chain dash, and when I got those things first, the game was just on. So the last thing that I want to hit about map was there are fast travel locations. I love fast travel. In a game where exploration is promoted, giving the player a way to easily backtrack and easily go check out areas where they've already explored is huge. Okay, I love the environment. The environment is, I think, rich and mechanically well made. But if I had to backtrack through this whole game, I'd kind of be sad. Interesting to note is that these warping locations act very similarly to bonfires in Dark Souls. If you use one of these warp locations, the level resets. Health packs are respawned. Enemies are respawned. The general features that you've interacted with, they don't change. So like the modules don't reset or anything like that. But the enemies and health kits respawn. So at some point, if you go through a new area, maybe it's your first time exploring it, you might get kind of annihilated by the general environment. If you've, like, for example, when you go west and you haven't experienced these like spike crystal grids, oh shit, you're just going to get blown up when you don't know what's going on there. And then some of the enemies are new, so maybe you're going to get hit. But as you get better and better, you can plan your routes through the world so that you'll have like the luxury of exploring without having to worry about dying. So I'm not expressing this very clearly, but it lends well to doing the level, but then going back now that you're better at it, because you're not worried about dying. You can just explore more.
Yeah, my main problem with that was, one, I didn't know that was what was resetting things. So there were times when I just like teleported back when I was still in the same area, and then I'd get jumped. Like I expected areas to be cleared and they weren't. So I didn't notice that was the trigger. I assumed that it was just the level reset whenever you come back. But and when you cleared dungeons and actually pulled the modules out, did that also make sure that the dungeon stayed empty?
When you pull the module,
like there was a dungeon in the west that kind of acted as a shortcut between the area with the teleport and the final like run up to the boss.
Yeah.
And once I cleared that dungeon, there were times when I couldn't just make it through, and then there were times when I could just cut straight to the end. I'm not sure. Actually, maybe it was just that there was a shortcut, but I went the wrong way and went through the dungeon again after respawn.
There might have been, like, I know for a fact that warping resets the level, but I don't know if like going in a dungeon or out a dungeon, essentially that what do you call them in like RPGs, like a state-based level or a state-based dungeon or whatever. I think that's what it's called. There's like a term. It's called an instance level in RPGs, where like you go to an RPG setting in like World of Warcraft or something, and you just interact with like a cave opening, and it like teleports you out of the real world and into a new world. I don't think those reset the levels. I also think that if you go back into a dungeon, I know after you warp, the enemies will be there, but I don't think if you leave a dungeon and just come back later, if they'll be reset or not.
Okay. So, should we move over to the story side of things?
Yeah, fuck, that's going to be weird. I want to jump in for a second and just say why, when I mentioned earlier Dr. Strangelove, why that's important. because I realized that a lot of the story delivery is very reminiscent of Stanley Kubrick's sort of exposition style. This game,
Okay.
yeah, just roll with me for a second.
I will, but I'm skeptical. I want everybody
all right.
recognize
So
skepticism.
you've seen I hope you've seen films like Strange Love, like 2001: Space Odyssey. So when I think of Hyper Light Drifter and when I saw the Kubrick film, it made me sort of think about his style. The first 40 minutes of 2001: A Space Odyssey are just music and just images that show you stuff. Very similar to how Hyper Light Drifter has no text at all, except for the tooltips, like press A to dash, press X to sword. Like that kind of stuff is the only text you get until you do the monolith stuff. But when I think about how Kubrick starts up a film and gives you the setting and backstory, there's no real character monologuing at you. It's just a series of images and music that sets an atmosphere. And we had that for the first 5-10 minutes of Hyper Light Drifter, just like you'd have that for the first 15-20 minutes of a Kubrick film. Now, the images that we saw were not necessarily continuous. They're like these pockets of information. Like we saw the bodies, we saw the huge monolith shooting out of the ground with the Anubis dog. You saw the Titans going from their full healthy form to their shattered, disintegrated form. And that kind of stuff makes me think even more of Kubrick, because in 2001: A Space Odyssey, for example, you saw this mishmash of random-ass cinema clips that just somehow created the exposition of 2001: A Space Odyssey. And it made sense in that film, but it makes sense in Hyper Light Drifter too, for a very similar reason. You don't know what's going on until you get more of the story.
I just found that regardless of the Kubrick connection, I found that the dialogue-free exposition in this game was pretty impressive. They managed to communicate a lot with just pictures, and when you go to talk to someone in this game, a text bubble pops above their head, but instead of having text in it, it will be this kind of very detailed pixel art of what they're explaining to you. And I thought to remove language from the equation very directly, I thought, one, it's a cool design decision from just how you're telling your story, but it's also a pretty interesting nod to accessibility, that it makes the game a lot easier to understand if you're illiterate, which is admittedly a pretty small, some of the control stuff, if you're looking at the tooltips in the menu, that's still not super useful, but you might be able to hand this game to someone and have them figure out what all the upgrades do, what all the mechanics do, how to play everything, and what the story was without being able to read. And that's a pretty impressive feat in a game that actually has a story. Even
Do you think, though,
abstract?
I agree that it increases accessibility in that way, but do you think it decreases accessibility insofar as I'm not sure how easy this game would have been to play if you weren't already an experienced gamer? If you pick somebody who's never played video games and handed them Hyper Light Drifter, I'm not sure how quickly they would understand what's going on.
All right. Yeah. First response was, there's an easy mode. I know you don't like easy modes, but you were given an easy mode option at the start of the game.
Right, but that's sort of
that's tangential. The real question is there's upgrades that make sense within the context of gaming language. I immediately, when I saw the Charge Blade, knew to think of it. Before I even bought it, I looked at it and said, "Oh, it's the Zelda hold the sword out and then you do a 360." I understood the visual language of what the upgrades presented, and so I could make educated choices about what the upgrades were and which ones I'd want to buy. If you don't have that knowledge, all of a sudden those upgrades might not make sense, just seeing them performed, which is how they communicate what an upgrade is.
Yeah.
They basically give you a little GIF of what it does.
And there's an overall dungeon structure at work here that is never really explained. You get a little signal in the other drifter's house that's hey, here's some stuff. that maybe you could parse, but like it's really relying on a shared sort of gameplay vocabulary that I don't think would easily be accessed by people without it.
Yeah,
Right, I'll push back a little more. I think that you guys gave good examples of where the textless explanations might fail. I think Charge Blade is a good example, but stuff like the parry is pretty easily explained. Stuff like ammo upgrades are pretty easily explained. Stuff like the chain dash is pretty easily explained.
I didn't know that the upgrades for the guns were ammo upgrades until I bought them. I wasn't sure if it would be a damage upgrade. It just
fire rate.
It shows you a picture that has brackets around 3 empty ammo slots that are extended of what your current ammo slots are.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
If you look in the gun shop at one of the gun upgrades and you select if you hover over pistol or shotgun or rifle or whatever, it'll show you the gun with its ammo capacity, and then it'll have 2 extra empty ammos with brackets around it.
Right.
And
okay,
that made it, I guess, pretty clear to me. My other pushback is that, in some sense, I'm going to have to concede to make this work that there is some context that a seasoned gamer will just bring in, knowing that, oh, charge attack's going to deal more damage. Oh, mobility's good, so I might want to get my dash upgrade. Oh, parrying or invincibility frames. That's essentially what the shield dash is. It's giving your dash some iframes against everything except rockets. So that stuff is context that I brought in, but the game isn't that prohibitive of its money. You could probably get easily 5 or 6 upgrades in this game before you start running dry on your gold bits. And this game also, I think the only upgrade that you can't miss is the multi-dash, because you absolutely need that for some parts of the game. But other than that, there's no wrong way to get upgrades.
But Billy, you're still fixated on combat difficulty.
Yeah.
I'm saying very understanding of how to play this game, what your base objectives are, might be out of reach for people who haven't played similar sort of open world dungeon crawlers.
All right, now I see your point a little more.
If you don't know to look for the different what are they, the modules? If you don't know to look for the modules, so one thing I would say, Pete, is if you're assuming that the impediment here is reading, I don't know that the problem here in terms of knowledge, just gaming knowledge, is in any way impacted by whether you're reading the information or gleaning it from pictures and images. Because ultimately, even if they explained what every upgrade was, understanding the relative value of combat abilities or what the objectives are is still something that you need to bring in from other games.
Still honoring Pete's pushback. If I'm going to not focus on combat, I think that Pete's, or I'm not going to say this is Pete's entire point, but if we take out the words, or I should say it like this: if we put in words and make things well explained, a literate gamer still might not know what the fuck is going on with all these secret passages. Some gamers just are not very adept at finding hidden things. Our good friend John, for example, who's been on the podcast before, mentioned to me as I was talking to him about Hyperlight Drifter, again, that he really enjoyed and played as well, is that he's gotten worse over time at staying at finding the side story stuff. He just likes to mainline most of the games that he plays. He played a lot of completionist Hyperlight Drifter, but he said that even though he's a seasoned gamer, got kind of worse at the intuition to find these things. So maybe the literacy part doesn't actually play that big of a role in how the game is supposed to be played, which is a very Zelda style of go to these different unique worlds, flip some switches, or interact with some key objects, fight a boss and move on to the next one. That rinse and repeat model, for me, came from my massive context of 1990s games. That you're right, Pete, a person who is not, forget the fact that they can read or not, isn't video game literate might actually miss. So in that sense, I agree with your point a little bit, but I still think that what they were looking to achieve here of a sort of a textless way to explain the game was achieved, and it was a success.
Yeah, this criticism has nothing to do with their decision to forego text. But what that decision to forego text reflects is an overall commitment to minimalism. And it's that commitment to minimalism that creates this problem. Whereas the less, it's obvious, the less you give the gamer, the more you have to ask them to bring in themselves.
Yeah. And I think that ultimately, for this game being a kind of small indie game, but with a very, like, its art style is kind of, it evokes like an older style of
retro
game.
pixel.
Yeah, that retro pixel art. Its gameplay kind of draws from very obvious sources. Zelda, we've brought up multiple times. Even some other games like Fury and that kind of line of difficult, like a mix of bullet hell and also this dash-based, parry-based combat. A lot of this is kind of appealing to a very specific type of game player.
Yeah, they know their audience.
And I think that if you're focusing on that audience, they achieved it. If they were trying to make a more accessible... If this was a nod to accessibility rather than style, I think that, like you said, your critique is totally founded. Minimalism in this context... Like, if it was a very minimalist game, but the gameplay was simple, you could say, oh, it's kind of a nod to accessibility. This game, the gameplay is complex, but the minimalism seems to be much more of a stylistic decision.
Yeah.
And one that I think that pays off in spades. Like, it's really effective and evocative when the picture shows up on some of the different conversations you have with random characters, and maybe you see the boss in all of their form before you run into them, or you see explanations of historical situations just played out in front of you, which can be pretty cool.
So what you're saying, Gino, is we should take Hyperlight Drifter and To the Moon and have a baby where there's this textless game in a very simple but innocent but heart-wrenching game.
To the Moon could have used more combat. I felt first played it.
Could have used more hyperlight drifting.
Yeah.
It didn't have a single shotgun.
No, which is really an oversight when you think about it.
True. Okay, so I want to jump into some of the sort of hardcore story bits. Because this game, if you don't put together some of the pieces, is not going to make a lot of sense. I like the story has to be worked for, and the story is open-ended and very open to interpretation. Here's some of the general bits that I got, and I want to see what you all think about how this interpretation is. Now, this interpretation was developed from my own gameplay experiences, but I also did check out what Reddit had to say about this, what Wikipedia had to say about this, which is a various... What?
Before we get started, did you guys read or have somebody read to you, I guess I should say, because that's what I did, the ciphers?
The monoliths?
Yeah, the monolith.
I activated I activated 6 or 7 monoliths, but I didn't actually get to the monolith chamber yet. But I read what they all say, so I know their text.
Yeah. Which makes me furious. I'm going to yell about that later, but let's do the story first.
Okay. Can we discuss? So I did not read the monoliths, and I did not get super deep into the actual story. Most of the stuff I gleaned was just context sensitive, and I got the sense. Now maybe you guys will tell me that the monoliths will tell me I'm full of shit, but
go for it.
What I thought was, one, I wasn't sure whether my character was a hero in any way. Because there were certain areas that by the end of it, it felt like I was going out of my way to just take out entire swaths of enemies, of people that were not a threat to me anymore. There were some areas that there was no benefit to clearing them, and the enemies were very spread out. Or the resistance seemed to be getting higher and higher and higher, to the sense that I'm maybe getting to the heart of this culture. And they're fighting to keep me out, and I wasn't sure if I was perpetrating some sort of terrible genocide against these different races. Like, there's bird people up north, there's frog people to the east, and then there's kind of gopher people to the west.
They're otters.
They're otters.
Okay, there are otter people to the west, and
to the west is the raccoons.
Okay, raccoon people. The otter people are to the east, and the otter people the frog people seem to genocide the otter people.
Yeah, they took them out.
But each of these different cultures these different peoples that you run into, I was not sure. Like the frogs, I had a pretty good idea that they had devastated the otter people, and I didn't feel super bad. I didn't feel super bad about ending the frogs. The birds, it seemed like the boss of the birds annihilated some sort of creature before you, when you run up there, and I don't know what it was. I guess it was a fox or something, maybe. The birds seemed like bad news too. It was the raccoons that it seemed like all the cultural artifacts around that area were raccoon statues, and it seemed like it was actually their land that I was invading.
You're pretty much spot on with the raccoons, but no, you're the good guy. The frogs are dicks, the birds are dicks, and the raccoons have been sort of corrupted by these gem forces. So the raccoons are really more of a mercy killing than anything else.
Okay.
That kind of holds true for like all the races. At least in some extent.
But I gotta say, before you pull the veil, it is impressive how much they communicate just by the level design of each of these different environments.
Oh yeah.
This game might have the most piles of bodies that I've seen in a pixel art game ever.
Yeah.
And it is effective. You find so many different skeletons in poses that kind of evoke what happened to them. The east is probably the most gut-wrenching area I found because the otter people, you'll find otters just floating off the beaten path, face down in the water, or there's segments where you go underwater and you'll see just bodies floating in the water. There's just piles of pelts in places that are just...
There's some of them that are strung up on pikes and skinned.
Yeah, and it's a real grisly scene in a game that's pretty minimalist in its art design. The moment when in the east you kind of go through the center area and you realize that this whole area is based around the body of one of these titans that is kind of floating in the water, and you kind of hop around it. There's a titan in each of the different areas. But
I was going to say, the one to the north that you see sort of clinging to the side of the mountain, that was a great scene.
Yeah. And the bones of one that you kind of walk through in the west, all of them are super cinematic, seeing these gigantic creatures. But it's impressive how much calamity they managed to capture in a game where it's pretty stark. Other than enemies, it's pretty stark. You only run into a few other living creatures, but all of the scenes of kind of grisly horror around you are pretty dang impactful.
Absolutely.
Okay,
you do see the titans in the areas, and you get a little glimpse of how they were dispatched, which is pretty cool. But yeah, the Titans were at some point defeated. So I think I'm going to try to pull back the veil. Are we okay with that, Gino?
Yeah, that's fine. I've said my piece of the game without the knowledge, the dark knowledge.
Yeah. Okay. So in the opening sequences of the game, you see a couple of snippets of the Drifter sort of reaching out or reaching towards what looks to be a large crystal. This crystal is going to have significance, and the immediate follow of that scene is the Drifter being sort of attacked or consumed or infected by this darkness. So what I think is going on, and what some other theories, sort of cross theories, have said, was that there was a super advanced ancient race,
the Forerunners, basically
the Forerunners,
of course,
and
always
they come
before
across through knowledge that you get from the monoliths as well as some contextual pieces, is that they were approaching this like super crystal technology that would imbue seemingly eternal life to those who were able to either wield it or integrate it with their physical form. And this was the stuff of gods, right? They were able to essentially create the key to immortality, which is this sort of like mega crystal. It had a fancy name. I forget what the actual.
The
You know what the
cell.
name of it?
Yeah, they call it just the cell.
I think it was called like the immortal cell.
Something like that, yeah.
But the Protheans made a mistake.
Essentially, yeah.
Yep.
This power could not be
Yeah.
wielded safely. You get a little piece of this actually that I think that those who created it didn't use it on themselves, because
because they're dead.
Well, yeah, but I think they got wiped out, right? But if you look at the monoliths, when you activate one of them, you see like a little hologram or a little image or a ghost of what appears to be the ancient race people, and they don't have the cell as a part of them in their image. That was another sort of like theory, is that they don't seem to be using it in the image that they leave behind. So maybe they designed it but didn't use it on themselves, or they were using it for something different. Either way, this like immortal cell was essentially the power of the gods. Two deities now come into play. One of which is that black dog, this Anubis-looking figure, and the other is just like a black mass of corruption that I think is referred to as Judgment.
Yeah.
In this game, the Steam trading card calls it the Judgment. That's how I learned that it was called the Judgment, because there's a Steam trading card that called it the Judgment.
Yeah, and that's the thing that all of your visions kind of hint towards. Like, whenever you get enough modules to fight the boss of a level, you'll see this gigantic black like mass kill you, and then you'll wake up and there'll be digital crows pecking at you.
Digital crows.
So there seems to be this skirmish between the Anubis figure and this black massive Judgment figure over this immortal cell. It is implied that the Anubis figure is in some way aiding or guiding the Drifters. The Drifters are not really like a race, but more of just a job. Someone who essentially is like a scrapper or a collector of ancient advanced artifacts.
You're like a Witcher.
Sorta.
Yeah.
Sorta.
Bringing back Vinny the Day.
But the Anubis figures are sort of guiding you along your path, saying, hey, like, here's where the modules are. You should go find these, interact with the world. And as you do, there's like a big like crest in the middle of the town, the center town, that starts getting lit up as you activate these modules. Once you light them all up, you do travel to effectively the center of the earth, I think, where this Uber cell is. You fight Judgment, kill Judgment. You're able to destroy this crystal, but you are not able to save yourself from this disease, this consumption.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's sort of implied that maybe you were a pawn by the Anubis figure. Maybe they were keeping you alive against the Judgment's disease. Maybe they were, just leading you as a pawn in some greater scheme. But you're essentially a piece on the board between these two deities, fighting to either control or destroy, or maybe eliminate any access to this immortality cell. Did I hit a lot of it, Pete? I think that's the overarching sweeping things. Yeah,
it's basically a Prometheus narrative.
Yeah.
Like, we've stolen fire from the gods, and now we must be punished for it.
And how do the monoliths tie into all the different races that are hanging out in the different corners?
All right, cool. So as we get close to this immortality being achieved, this crystal got in some way corrupted. It is heavily implied and speculated upon by the community that, since I think Anubis is the deity of rebirth and like the life cycle, like sort of like the incarnation cycle.
It's a god of death.
In Egypt.
Right. So fucking with death like throws a wrench in that, and if you fuck with death, the cycle doesn't continue
Death
properly.
fucks back.
Yeah, death fucks with you back. It's implied that these titans were erected in some sort of response to this creation, or maybe the titans were created and they were harnessing the power of this immortal cell. We get evidence of sort of like two other power sources in the world. One is that pink fire stuff, and the other are those green crystals. Mm-hmm. Back in the, I guess what we would call like the Titan Wars, when the Titans were being, I guess when the Titans were ravaging the world, and the world was defending themselves against the Titans. It led to almost a mass extinction of everything. So the bird people to the north were originally a peaceful race. They were corrupted by the corrupt crystal and then became a sort of like shamanist cult. We get information of that from the last like peaceful bird person that you see, who's like safeguarding like a nursery of other little birds.
Yeah.
His story, he or she, their story depicts essentially a turning point in the bird culture where they became like savage, shamanistic, evil, corrupt, and they sort of saved a couple of eggs and is now preserving that society. There's a little scene like that for all the races that say, yo, I'm like the last of my race that still got their right mind. So the northern people, the birds, became this like shamanistic cult magic users. To the east, you had the peaceful otters who stayed peaceful, but the frog race sort of like became savage and corrupted, and they enacted sort of genocide on the otters. To the west, the raccoon people developed these weapons, these sort of like cannons that used green crystal power, but there was like a nuclear green crystal meltdown, and it crystallized that whole area, like trapping them or making some of them go mad. And it's implied that the final boss of the west area was in some way immortalized or had like an unnatural preserved life that drove him mad. So this says how they were all corrupted, but also gives a sort of inkling of how all of their titans were destroyed. It seems like in the east it was like drowned, or like they drowned their civilization to also kill the titan. In the north there was like some kind of like freezing effect, or like magic wielder or something killed their titan. And in the west, the titan was all shot to shit because they had these crystal cannons, but oh no, like the development of that technology fucked up their culture. Like all around in these sort of, I guess, these first three worlds, there's a great inkling of how the titans were dealt with, and you can see from their remains and from the aftermath of that world like how much devastation was wrought in response to this singular immortal cell corrupting the world around it.
Okay, cool. And Pete, what is your problem with all of this?
Well, I mean, no, I think the story's decent. It is sort of a fairly straightforward retelling of like man develops technology, technology corrupts man. I mean, it's a classic story. I have no problem with it. My problem is with these ciphers, the monoliths. I don't think there's any quicker way to skyrocket the pretentiousness of a game than to include some sort of made-up language you need to decode. Nothing is gained by that. It just adds a chore for like people who love ciphers, I guess. I wasn't about to decode this fake language because one, it's not even clear from the way it's presented that it could be decoded. I mean, obviously, if they're going to include it, it probably will be. But two, just make it in English. It's just giving you a chore. It's not fun, and I hate it. That's
okay. Okay, that's fair. So we probably won't play Fez on this podcast then. I don't know if you
probably won't speak or read much Albed.
No.
Albed is not that. Albed is just a simple text replace. That one's pretty easy.
What, like a shift, like 3 letters down or something?
I don't know if it's a shift, but it is instead of this vowel, it's this vowel. Instead of this
there
consonant,
is some
it's this
intention.
I could live with that.
To Albed.
These ones are entirely new forms of squiggles, and like it's not for the amount of world building it gives you, it's not worth it, especially if you're going to present the bulk of your like actual textual, not even the bulk, the entirety of your actual textual backstory through these stupid ass made up ciphers.
Makes sense. I mean, if you're going to commit to having an all visual communication style, then don't backfill some textual stuff that is even more obtuse.
Yeah.
That seems like it defeats the purpose of having this minimalist execution, to then also to have a text system in there, but you have to go through several hoops to then be able to read it. Like, we have the easiest presentation, and then we have the most obtuse.
Yeah, most difficult possible presentation.
It's a weird combination, but at least the story that they're telling is pretty simple and is worthwhile unto itself. It's not just a lot of bullshit for bullshit's sake.
Yeah, we run into the same sort of like proper noun problems. Like once you introduce like a shadowy specter called Judgment, that's sort of ruling this world in a lot of ways, you've lost me a little bit. But I will say the presentation of the Titans, when they first pop up and then they sort of flash cut to their rusted hulks, that might be one of the coolest things I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, the intro cutscene is incredible.
Yeah.
And just exploring this world does enough of the work for storytelling that I kind of can't hold anything against this game. Like, it's pretty impeccable with its artistic design. Even it's incredible for how much unique art and assets they use, that this game manages to be so evocative and feel so big. Like, there aren't even reproduced, like, the carnage isn't necessarily copy pasted. Mm-hmm. Like, they come up with different terrible situations over and over and over again, and that probably takes a toll on someone having to make that many depictions of violence, but it's evocative in a weird way. Like, nothing was spared in this world, and everyone suffered in their own way. Gotta say, I did feel bad that the frogs were so evil. They were ninja frogs. I thought they would be cool, but
they are cool. They did something real bad. They started
really
a genocide of the otters.
Yeah.
So I want to take just a second and just read out what the monoliths give you. It's going to be a direct quote from the game.
How long is this reading of it?
Just 4 lines.
Okay.
Great, thank goodness.
If you get through all the monoliths, you get essentially a sort of, in many ways, a confirmation of what we were talking about. So the quote begins like this: "You get this after finding all 16 monoliths in."
There's 16 of the damn things.
Yeah, there's 16. So here's the quote: "Harnessing a great wellspring, a perfect immortal cell was crafted to be imbued with an all-sentient life, a noble goal. Though such a power terrified others and brought ruin, as its purpose was transmogrified. The abhorrent cell still festers deep in the chambers of this world." End quote.
So what you're saying is they shouldn't have made the Reapers. The Reapers were a mistake.
Yeah,
pretty much.
It was a mistake to release the Flood.
Yep.
This super weapon that cleanses everything, we thought it was really bad, but really there's a hidden meaning too. The all story.
Like the narrative. I mean, even you go back to Adam and Eve eating from the tree of knowledge. You're expelled from paradise. This is the narrative for so many games.
Oh man, God was the secret ancient alien in Adam and Eve.
He used the blood. I finally understand Genesis.
He was the Protheans all along. Or they, she, God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look,
all God.
I think we've all been saying the same thing. To be fair, like this narrative in its broad outlines is the same one we've seen a million times. But the execution in this case, like we've said, it was incredible, really.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And
now I want to add another
definitely
layer.
Recommend Hyper Light Drifter.
I want to add another little layer of depth here. So this game was developed by, I think, an indie company, Kickstarter backed. And if you were a member of the Kickstarter backing, you got access to like some beta bosses and an additional playable character or like a different costume.
Yeah, you got
to play as the Anubis figure or like an Anubis dog.
Do they call the people who donate to Kickstarters? Is that the people?
I don't know.
Backers.
Backers.
Is that it?
It was kind of a small team. The developer group is called Heart Machine,
which is a good name for a company.
It is a good name, and its director, one of the lead designers, Alex Preston, suffers from like a similar heart condition, and is himself battling with an ailment that is persistent in many ways, parallel to the Drifter, and that is what I believe to be an intentional design as well. That maybe Preston put a little bit of himself into the game.
Yeah, he said as much. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think it was. I didn't find a quote, so I can't provide a quote, but I'm pretty sure that was confirmed in some way.
Yeah.
Very cool. So
Yeah,
there's
very
Hyper
cool
Light,
indeed.
There's Hyper Light Drifter. / shotgun.
The game does have what I think cool replayability aspects. You do get harder versions. You are rewarded for exploring and completing the game by finding more gold bits, unlocking more
translation
keys. It actually kind of reminds me of The Witness, where The Witness had, I guess, like the mainline puzzles, but if you stayed in that same area and solved more puzzles, you'd get more of the game. It was usually more like tertiary, obscure, but valuable to those who cared about it, parts of the game. So in this case, in Hyper Light Drifter's case, yeah, you can go north and find your 4 modules and fight your bird boss, or you can find all 8 and get some keys and get some costumes and get some maybe some extra little I guess like get the monoliths too. Like you have more that you could explore in this game, and you're rewarded for it. I will say, I typically don't like the use of like illusory walls or like super hidden. Like you have to notice a single pixel.
I loved the use of negative space in this game. Specific when it comes to the illusory walls. A lot of the time, the way that you knew that there was something going on to the side was either you were up against a wall, but like the game would keep scrolling if you like went up and to the right, but for some reason it wouldn't scroll further to the right, and so I was like, oh, there must be a trigger to let me go over there or something.
Yeah.
Or like you'd run up against a wall and the camera, there'd be like a light or something that would kind of imply that maybe there's a pathway, or there'd be some crystals blocking it that you could break, but there was no obvious reason why you should break them. I thought that the game did a really good job of framing its camera to kind of imply that there were secrets to be found, and it did a good job of showing you things just outside of your reach.
So let me, I guess, clarify a little bit. There was an example of finding a gold bit. You could find a gold bit in the north region by just walking behind a building.
Yeah, that was
seemed
great.
Like it. Well, I think we're talking about 2 different things. There was one where you could actually walk in a little hallway and hit a switch. That one was real good. I liked that one a lot. But then there was one that was just like in a box behind a bush. It gave you no indication it was there. I just got lucky because I was swinging my sword and hit a box that was completely off screen.
Oh, yeah, those were not as good. I like the ones like, for example, where there was a building in between you and the box, and it turned out that the building you could walk through the building, where it looked like it was a solid object you couldn't get around.
Right. So this is going to sound weird coming from the completionist grindfather in me. I don't like it when it's just super, super hidden just to be impossible to find. I want there to be some cool like clue or hint or trigger that my or any players, if you're paying attention, you get rewarded. Not something like, oh, I just swung my sword on accident and hit a box, and oh, hey, there's a yellow bit. Kind of like how I don't like it in Dark Souls, where, well, you just spend, if you want to find illusory walls, 2-3 hours just swinging your sword at stone structures, hoping one of them disappears.
Yeah.
That's not the kind of completionism that I like.
Yep. Though I will say this game is probably an early front runner for the Grindfather Award. Wouldn't you agree?
Could be. It's definitely going to get nominated.
We'll see. We'll see if there's a 2D Metroidvania that comes out this year.
Right? It's only February. Let's not count our chickens.
Yeah.
All right, so that's Hyper Light Drifter, which means that it is now my turn to pick another game.
Is there another Sonic game out there?
No. I mean, there are, but I don't want to do that to myself.
Are you going to play the new Final Fantasy mobile game?
No.
Are we playing that one?
Oh, we're just playing 9 again.
Yeah, run it back. You guys know how to play it now. It's a second reading. No, I have choices for you. I have 3 choices.
What?
I'm giving you guys a decision because there were 3 games that I really wanted to play, and they are all different in terms of their appeal to me.
Okay.
1, Kentucky Route Zero. It is a weird.
Oh yeah, I remember hearing about that
Americana. You're a trucker in the Midwest, trying to find this legendary highway.
We've been talking about this one for like a long time, haven't we?
Yeah, it's been on my list, but I've been holding off on it because they slowly have been releasing episodes. I think it's done now.
Okay.
Finally, I think. But I'm fine with just going as deep into Kentucky Route Zero as I feel comfortable with, as I can. 2, Life is Strange.
Yes, it is.
That is a game that's set in I think it's the 90s in Seattle or something, and you play as a girl in a high school who has time powers, who can rewind time.
Okay.
And
also episodic.
Also episodic, but also all of its episodes are out.
Mm-hmm.
And 3, Magic Pendule: The Quest for Color.
Jesus Christ, Gino.
Which is a profoundly weird Japanese game where you draw things, and then the drawings come to life and fight for you. It's kind of a fighting food-on situation, except instead of making food come to life and fight for you, it's drawings. Which of these 3 appeals to you the most?
All right, I think Life is Strange beats the Kentucky Trucker game because Life is Strange is just really good. And
have you played it already, Billy?
I have played, I think, 1 episode, but I would be so down to just finish that game.
Pete.
Yeah. No, Life is Strange sounds good to me. I like 90s Seattle
but
culture.
I'm just looking at the cover art for Magic
Pendule: The Quest for Color?
Pendule?
Yeah!
It's just...
How do you spell pendule?
I think
Pengel.
Yeah, Pendule.
Is that a word?
Nope. Now it is.
I don't think so.
Oh man, this is wild.
It's just I'm just torn
it's
between
so weird.
I'm torn between playing an actual good game.
Well, Magic Pendul's actually a weirdly good game.
And what could be a good game. See that's you didn't let me finish. Like what is a good game and what could be a good game. The last time I made this choice, Pete wasn't involved, I think. I think it was when Pete was out and we were choosing between what was it, Paper Mario? No, it was Super Mario RPG and Sonic Chronicles.
Yes.
Now Super Mario RPG we knew was a good game, but Sonic Chronicles was up in there. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, and I said, let's play the weird one. I'm gonna give Gino some credit. Let's play the weird one.
I vote Life is Strange.
I vote Life is Strange for the exact reason why I should have not picked Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood.
That's fair. That's fair. That's why I gave you a choice.
That was good of you, Gina.
I will play Magic Pendule at some point, but I remember from the little that I played of it as a child, 1, I'm very bad at drawing. 2, that game is surprisingly good. And one day I'll get back to it, but it is not this week. So
also, I don't have my PS2 set up anywhere.
Like a strong descriptor.
What?
Like nobody wants to hear something surprisingly good.
Well, I mean, it's profoundly Japanese, and it's got a whole lot of weirdness going on, and you wouldn't think that a game about drawing creatures, like your drawing skills would actually have an impact. They do, which was really bad for me. I had I think it was some square abomination that I drew.
There's speculation that Pendule comes from what the Japanese might have called or pronounced gel pen, but they called it pen jelly.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I think this might have supposed to be called Magic Gel Pen.
Yeah.
But now
everyone knows we like
Magic Pen Gel.
Okay, are we calling it Life is Strange? Because Billy, you seem to be.
No, we're sticking with Life is Strange.
Life is Strange. We're going to do Life is Strange.
Okay. I will eventually pick Kentucky Route Zero because that game's really weird and cool. But
hey, we have been talking about it for a while.
For now, Life is Strange. Maybe Pete, you can get the assist, and then
I might. We'll see. We'll circle back around in 2 weeks.
Okay. We'll play Life is Strange. Till next time. Thank you, Billy.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. I had a blast with Hyper Light Drifter. This is probably going to go on my replay list at some point. Because although I don't think I'm going to 100% this game, I think this game is definitely worth revisiting in a more casual setting. I had to kind of play it straight through in like 2 or 3 sittings, but I think I want to take in the scenery again, even if they are filled with the flayed bodies of a defenseless otter race.
Thank you, Pete.
Always a good time, everybody. The only thing I like drifting more than Hyperlight Drifter is my souped-up Honda Civic. So I would recommend.
My 1995 Honda Civic. Let's go.
My Honda Skyline.
And thank you, listeners. Remember, if you want to get in touch with the show, at deeplistenspod, deeplistens.libsyn.com, or deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. Get in touch with us. We have feedback for a later Zombie Pie episode, but not for this one. So, Till next time, everyone. Peace!